Warning! This episode is strictly for adults. Why? Because we're about to uncover the intimate, surprising, and sometimes downright scandalous aspects of sex in the Middle Ages. Yes, you heard it right. Medieval people had sex, and they weren't shy about it. Let's start by dismantling some myths. When people think of the Middle Ages, they often imagine a grim, prudish world. But reality, much more nuanced. For example, the so-called rite of the first night, where lords supposedly claimed a bride's virginity, has no historical basis. And chastity belts? Complete nonsense, too. Medieval society was stricter than ours in some ways, but surprisingly open in others. Physicians, for example, played a major role in shaping medieval ideas about sexuality. Avicenna, the legendary Persian doctor, revolutionized Western medicine in the 13th century with his canon of medicine. He argued that sex was essential for both physical and mental health. Back then, it was believed that women produced sperm during orgasm, and that mixing male and female sperm created life. Therefore, ensuring a woman's pleasure wasn't just nice, it was seen as vital. Medieval medical texts didn't shy away from discussing sexual practices. They emphasized the importance of foreplay and the stimulation of women's erogenous zones. In cases of difficulty, some texts even suggested practical solutions, like the man lying down while the woman took charge to help him achieve an erection. Progressive? Absolutely. Now, let's talk about one particularly fascinating work, The Mirror of Pleasure, a 14th-century erotic manual often called the Catalan Kama Sutra. This anonymous text went into explicit detail, offering 24 sexual positions categorized into 5 groups. It also gave advice tailored to both men and women, aiming for mutual satisfaction. And yes, it got very specific about positioning, limb placement, and even the type of bed to use. It seems they weren't afraid to aim for perfection. Meanwhile, the Church played a dual role in medieval sexuality. On the one hand, it imposed strict rules, limiting sex to procreation within marriage. Couples were expected to abstain on Sundays, during fast periods, and even on certain weekdays like Wednesdays and Fridays. In theory, this left married couples only 91 to 113 days per year for sexual activity. On the other hand, the Church tolerated certain practices as lesser evils, like prostitution. Cities even established regulated brothels, where men, clergy included, could relieve themselves of their desires. Prostitution wasn't without controversy, though. Attitudes toward sex workers varied throughout the Middle Ages. In some periods, they were left alone or even assisted with issues like abortion. At other times, they were stigmatized, stripped of their property, and forced to wear distinct clothing. One curious rule forbade prostitutes from wearing veils, which were considered a symbol of modesty. Despite the Church's efforts to control sexuality, some practices flourished. For example, sodomy, broadly defined to include acts like oral sex, was condemned. But the very existence of these rules suggests such acts were common enough to merit attention. And let's not forget some bizarre claims, like women allegedly using live fish to seduce men. Stories so strange, they can only make us wonder what else we don't know about medieval life. Finally, let's not underestimate how central pleasure was, even in a society shaped by religious restrictions. Medieval people weren't prudish. They were practical, resourceful, and sometimes bold in their pursuit of intimacy. Whether through medical advice, erotic literature, or bending church rules, the desire for connection and satisfaction transcended centuries. The Middle Ages may seem like a distant and alien world, but when it comes to sex, they weren't so different from us. They explored intimacy, pushed boundaries, and even created guides to improve their love lives. While the Church tried to regulate everything, the people found ways to embrace their humanity. The medieval bedroom, as it turns out, wasn't a place of repression. It was a space of experimentation, creativity, and passion. So next time someone calls the Middle Ages dark, just remember, they knew how to light a fire where it mattered.